Hello and welcome to Business Uncensored with me, Justin Murillo, as your host. Today I had the opportunity to interview entrepreneur and owner of Amherst Madison Real Estate Advisors, Nick Schlekeway. We are starting from the beginning, dissecting his trials and tribulations while building this successful real estate brokerage. Nick had some amazing tips throughout, so make sure you listen to the end. I hope you enjoy.
And I always equate it to like, at a startup, as a founder, you almost have like 20 hats on top of your head. You know, you've heard the saying, like, wear a lot of hats. It's like, you wear a lot of hats, you have a lot of duties. Well, you grow revenue, right? That's mission number one, is to find some kind of model that you think will profit or scale and then grow that revenue. Well, you grow revenue and then you can take a hat and pass it to somebody you hire. Right. And then you grow a little bit more revenue and you take another one off your head and pass it to somebody. And that's kind of just the way it rolls. And over time, you have ideally, fewer and fewer hats that you're wearing, and then you can specialize more.
Do you think that these CEOs and the people that are trying to build these companies from the ground up are continually trying to hire people that are way better at them at their job over and over and over again? Is that the whole goal?
Yeah, well, it's certainly to replace themselves with someone more talented in whatever, division or team or function of the company that you're talking about. Yeah. Like when it comes to recruiting, you want to hire somebody who is a better recruiter than you, ideally. When it comes to marketing, you want to hire somebody who's a better marketer, and more specialized. And that's what they've done for 20 years or 10 years or whatever. I shouldn't always say 10 years because it doesn't matter what their tenure is, it matters what their talent is. I think a lot more than tenure. But having said that, the other thing that I think is important in this conversation about delegation and micromanaging and talent and best use of the organization is, like, even as a founder, most founders have a couple skill sets that are really strong. And the reality is, take even someone like Elon Musk, for example. The guy's a freaking genius. For him to be, like, quote unquote, the dumbest person in the room
would be ridiculous.
Like, good luck with that. Yeah. And he's not alone. There's a lot of people like that. And so what they run into is that even if you are better technically at some skill than somebody you hire for that same skill, they're going to do a better job than you because they have more time. You know what I mean? So that's the other thing is, like, even if somebody does it differently, and even if, hey, maybe they don't get quite the results that you did as a founder when you were doing it yourself, guess what? They have 40, 50 hours a week to dedicate to it, and you only have 5.
Yeah.
So they're still going to crush you in terms of performance, and they're still going to do a much better job than you would do, simply because they have more time to focus on it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like as a CEO or someone building these companies, you have to wear all those hats at some point. So you got to be average at most of them. And then you, like you said, you have your specific talents.
And I think that really comes too from the bootstrap environment when you're self-funded and you don't have a bunch of money to get started, which I didn't, and a lot of founders don't. That's a different path than people who get financing, who have, somebody who's a backer, who have investors. They have more money, and therefore they can hire people faster who are good at what they suck at. And when you went the path that I went, and that a lot of entrepreneurs go, although it seems to be more and more rare that people go the way that I did with bootstrapping it, you don't have that. So it's not always the case that you're put in this position of having to know how to do all these things. So if you don't have the financing, if you're trying to bootstrap it, then yeah, like you need to know how to do pretty much everything on some level, which is painful sometimes, and it's slow, and you have to learn things. And I can speak to that if you want to, but you have to learn things that you never wanted to have to learn, which sucks. But here's, in the long run, when you look at it over a decade, here's a silver lining on that. I didn't realize 10 years ago, which is that enough to be dangerous about everything. So it makes you much more effective at hiring people to do those things. Because, for instance, even something simple, it's not simple, but simple in concept, like SEO or web dev or building websites, like that's something I had to force myself to learn a little bit about, actually quite a bit about. Actually, I got to the point where I knew more about it than the vendors I was hiring and outsourcing that stuff to. Well, I have to learn enough about that in order to not get screwed, to be blunt, when I hire somebody. Because if you don't know enough about it to be dangerous, then you're going to hire somebody who pulls the wool over your eyes and makes you think that they know what they're doing, and they don't.
Yeah, it's a big gamble when you can't be able to vet them the right way.
Yeah, and that's the case with everything. And so you do have an advantage bootstrapping something and wearing all these hats. You do have kind of a built-in advantage over other owners if they haven't done that, because you know all these things and you can hire more effectively, and you also can step into a role if something critical is vacated, or somebody quits, or somebody gets sick, or somebody gets hit by a car, or whatever. You actually have a skill set. Yes, and I think about somebody like Elon Musk in that regard. Yeah. I mean, that guy can do pretty much any job, I'm sure, in his organization.
Well, it sounds like it. Now he's trying to be part of the cabinet and kind of get into the political side of it.
Which makes you very flexible and very effective in a lot of ways if you need to be.
Well, while we're talking about bootstrapping it, Nick, take us back to the beginning. What was the initial spark that led you to start Amherst Madison? And did you always see yourself as a entrepreneur in the real estate field?
Entrepreneur, yes, simply because I grew up in an environment with entrepreneurs. My parents both were. My dad was in construction. My parents at one point, early childhood, my dad had gone bankrupt from a construction deal that went bad, and a series of kind of dominoes that knocked him over. So I grew up very poor. Money was scarce. Money was fear. Money was something that ran out and couldn't be depended on. And I was very self-conscious about that for a long time. I still probably am on some level. I think when you grow up in that environment, it never leaves entirely. So, but my parents did get back on their feet, certainly by the time I was a teenager, if not earlier. And they had a couple different businesses. They had like a couple hair salons. They had a coffee shop. They had like one of the first Moxie Javas in the Treasure Valley. My parents had one in Eagle. They had a couple of apartments that my dad had scraped together some money and built himself, and he then got into the rental game, and that was very influential on me, watching him and helping him build those things, because I was helping my dad in construction growing up. But I learned pretty quickly this rental business is a pretty good business, and so that's actually why I got my license to sell real estate in the first. It wasn't to help other people initially; it was just to find rentals and like know more about the housing market and have the access to the MLS. And this is such a common story. It's almost hilarious at this point. Like the number of people who get into this business just because they want to invest in real estate, and it just like sucks you in, man. I always warn the people at real estate school, and they always look at me funny. They don't know what I'm talking about, but I'm just like, okay, how many of you are here just to like invest in real estate? And half the damn room raises their hand. And I just said, be careful, because this thing will suck you in. Because once you have your license, you're like, well, I might as well start, helping people. Like, I got nothing else. I got this license. I might as well go make some commissions. And you fall in love with it, and you close a couple deals. And, that's kind of a good feeling, and I guess a rush from a sales standpoint. And there's money to be made. And that's what happened to me. So I was a full-time firefighter. I get my license. The next thing I know, I'm doing 2 or 3 deals a month. And I had some decisions to make about my career. And what really pushed me over the edge to leaving the fire service, I left on November 1st of 2012, was that I knew I wanted to start my own brokerage. And I could have 2 jobs. I've had at least 2 jobs my whole life, it seems like. And that's a pretty common story for entrepreneurs. I think we all have horrible ADD.
So you were selling houses at that time, or you were just looking for investments at that time?
So it kind of went pretty quickly. So I bought my first house in 2010, got licensed the same year, but then started working with some people that I knew, and then started doing lead gen pretty aggressively, because I did one deal and I loved it. And I was like, okay, this is new. This is kind of exciting in a different way. So I started doing more of it, and built my business up in a couple of years. And so then, 2012 was a pivotal year for me, because it was a couple years into the business. I had went and got my broker's license as soon as I could, mostly for the education, but also because I just kind of started to have this feeling I was maybe someday we're going to want to start my own company. And my parents being entrepreneurs, I already had that bent. And my degree at Boise State was business management. So I had a lot of that percolating in the background that didn't have anything to do with being a firefighter.
Yeah.
And as much as I loved so many aspects of that job, that entrepreneurial side was pretty strong, and there was an itch that needed to be scratched.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have entrepreneurial aspects in all parts of your life, including your parents. What made you specifically go towards a brokerage instead of opening up a shop downtown?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the progression from, okay, I'm going to get my real estate license because I want to invest. And then, I had never done any client services before. I had never sold anything before. Everything in my life prior to real estate was construction, football, fire department, basically making a living with my back instead of my brain. And it was a really good challenge for me and something I wanted to find out. I was just having this conversation the other night with my brother-in-law, and we were talking about this period of my life. And I said, I wanted to learn if I could make a living with my brain instead of my back. And I wanted to challenge myself in that way. And that was a big reason why I started, leaning into it. And I love a challenge. And listen, I had a lot of people tell me I was going to fail like everyone does when they get in this business. Probably even more so with me because I was a very, how can I put this, like intimidating person. I mean, people think I'm intimidating now. They have no idea what I was like in my 20s.
Oh, Mike's told me.
I've mellowed out a lot. And everybody was just like, because I used to shave my head and I used to, work constantly. I didn't have a lot of social skills. I couldn't talk to people. I didn't like talking to people. And I've had to learn all that. And I loved that challenge. I really did. I loved the challenge of really kind of transforming into a different person in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And I did that in my 20s and my early 30s. And the brokerage thing, it was just one thing leads to another. It's like I get my license, I start selling. Oh, this is kind of fun. Oh, I got a lot of people telling me that I'm going to fail. I actually like it. So I'm going to lean in and prove everybody wrong. And also just for myself, learn a different skill and become a better rounded human. I mean, more well-rounded. I've always wanted to be like a Renaissance man, truly. Mm-hmm. That's really what I've always kind of wanted to become. And I've never wanted to be somebody who was pigeonholed or who was like easily identified as, he's just this or he's just that or he's just this. It's always been important for me to be adaptable and to have a lot of different things. And it does go back, I think, to that entrepreneurial bent of getting bored easily and wanting to do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So the real estate brokerage was pretty simple at that time. It was like, I know I want to start my own company. I've got this real estate thing now, which I didn't even have. It was kind of surprising, but a couple years in, I understand how to sell real estate. I think I can teach some other people how to sell because I did have a really strong coaching and training background with Boise State, and the fire department has great training systems. And I knew how to train people and how to be trained. I was actually on the fire department. I was part of the hazmat team, and I was like the chemistry instructor for our hazmat team. And I taught classes before. So for me, it was like, okay, the stars are starting to come together. And then really what tipped me over the edge was this, Justin. It was that I recognized that what I was doing to be successful as an agent not only worked, but it was something that could be replicated. Mm-hmm. And if I could do it, getting into the market in 2010 when everything was destroyed, it was the Great Recession. It was the worst real estate market since the Great Depression. 75% of what we sold was short sales and foreclosures. Mm-hmm. I was earmarked as somebody who couldn't do it, who was going to fail, who didn't have the mouthpiece and the personality to do it. Like if I could do it, I could teach other people to do it. Mm-hmm. But basically, if I could do it with all that stuff stacked against me, anybody could do this. And then a lot of things that I wanted in a brokerage as a result of the way that I was doing it in my business model, I couldn't find. And that's just the entrepreneur story 101, right? Is like you have a need, you have a desire, and you can't find it in the marketplace. Yeah. So you're like, well, shit, I'm just going to go create that.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just being an entrepreneur, and that's what happened. And so fall of 2012, I recognized I wanted to start my own company, and I left the fire department November 1st of 2012, and I started Amherst 7 months later.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Was it scary jumping into it and kind of, well, you left your fire department job when? Just right after that, pretty much?
November of 2012, I left the fire department. I got a designated broker job at a DB at a different brokerage within a couple months of leaving the fire department. Did that for a few months and then left to start Amherst.
What was your biggest fear as an entrepreneur jumping into building a business that has been successful before? There's a bunch of big companies out there that are national or international. So
yeah,
jumping into that, what was your biggest fear trying to create Amherst Madison?
Going bankrupt, just like my father had, and reliving that childhood all over again and reliving what was kind of a nightmare for him and for our family. I was terrified. This is one of the things I can unequivocally say about that. And this is hard sometimes for people, I think, to hear, but there's nobody in my life that thought that was a good idea. Everybody tried to talk me out of leaving Boise Fire.
That's
everybody. Tough. My parents, my girlfriend at the time. It was one of the reasons I got divorced. So I was married in 2012. In a period of about 60 days, I sold my first house I'd ever bought and moved out of it, and just kind of floated around and rented for a couple of years. Didn't even really know where I wanted to go. I got divorced and I left my job at the fire department in like a 60 to 90 day period. And that's just kind of how I do things. Like when I make a decision that I'm unhappy and that I need to change my life, I freaking change like quick, and I'll change whatever the hell I need to, however fast I need to do it. So people thought that I had lost my mind. People thought I was having a mental breakdown. I mean, my parents tried to talk me out of it. I was dating a girl later that fall that tried to talk me out of it. The guys at the fire department thought that I had lost it. They were begging me to just take a leave of absence, think about it.
How did you feel at that moment about what you were doing? Were you pretty confident, or were you like, no, you just can't tell me no?
It was both. I knew that at some point in my life, I needed to find out if I could go into the marketplace, open up a business, and make it successful. I knew that and then once I knew that was there, and then I got curious about real estate, and then I started to really love real estate and really nerd out about all the different aspects of not only sales, but investing and development and just all the different aspects of commercial and residential. I mean, at one point, 6 years later, I went and got a master's degree from Georgetown in real estate. I mean, I really just started to nerd out on real estate, honestly. And I was genuinely interested in it, and I was genuinely confident that I could do it. So the primary motivator was scratching that itch, and the primary motivator was knowing, if not now, when. Once I realized I needed to do it, it was like, okay, well, why are you not doing it now? Are you going to wait? Because when I started it, I was 28. I was 27 when I left the fire department, 28 when I started the brokerage. And so, that's not like 48, but at the same time, you're sitting there and you're like, okay, I'm going to be 30 in a couple of years. How long am I going to wait to do this? Like, do I work for the fire department for 15 years and now I'm in my 40s and now I've got kids probably and a family, and now I'm going to go, be an entrepreneur. So it just really became like that. It was like, if not now, when? And I literally, when I made this decision, I just put everything up on a whiteboard, which I like to do when I'm making hard decisions. And it was like all the reasons to do it, all the reasons not to do it. And the not to do it basically came down to fear. And at that moment, it was like, I literally remember making the decision. I was on shift at the time, and I was like, I'm out of here. I'm doing this because I'm not going to let fear rule my life.
Yeah. How are you able to get past that fear? Or is it just kind of like, if fear is the only thing holding me back, I have to jump?
That was it. I didn't, quote unquote, get past it. I still haven't gotten past it. I mean, when you become an entrepreneur, it's like Boucher says this, and it's so true. Like when every morning you're unemployed, and so you always, I think, kind of have that gnawing sense. But that's good because that keeps you alive, and the people I worked with at the fire service, as much as I love those guys and as much as I miss so many of them still to this day, like most of them, like they just didn't have that because they had the security. They're part of a union and they're a part of, and I wanted something that was going to push me. And there's nothing wrong with them not having it. In fact, there's many days, trust me, where I'm jealous of that. But ultimately, when I look at myself in the mirror, it's like, no, I want something that pushes me. I want to have that motivation and go out there every day and take risks and do something different. I want to live that way. And that, at a certain point, doesn't it just come down to that? Like, how do you want to live? How do you want to live your life? And that's who I wanted to be. And I knew that I could do it. Deep down, I had that belief in myself. And some of and that's what's so freaking hard, man, is like, yes, it's important to, get input from people. And yes, it's important to have people close to you that you trust. But when you're making the riskiest choices and like those life-changing decisions, you're almost always going to be doing it alone. Like you're almost always going to be in a position where you just have to look inside and have that just unbending faith and trust in yourself. and faith and trust in God as well. I mean, I don't know if if you're spiritual, if you're not, no matter what religion you identify with. I did have a relationship with God, and at that time it was pretty rocky, and it was pretty rough, and it was pretty inconsistent. But I also think that was part of my decision. I think that He was also in my corner, and speaking to me in those quiet moments.
Yeah, well, you notice these commonalities with most entrepreneurs. They're undeniably optimistic or undeniably driven, or usually a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Of just, nope, it'll work. Trust me, I'm not going to let it fail. So how is it going to fail if I won't give up?
And that's the other thing you realize is that in life, we all think of making decisions, and we honestly, I think we put too much pressure on the decision and not enough pressure on the follow through. Like, we all think of it as, is it a right decision? Is it a wrong decision? Well, you make it the right decision or you make it the wrong decision with your follow through and with your dedication and your commitment. I mean, you can make just about anything freaking work if you stick to it long enough, and so that's the other thing that you realize is that, man, I don't even know if there are right and wrong decisions. It's your follow through and your dedication and your work ethic and how long you stick with it that makes something work or not work. Yeah. And that's the same with relationships, marriage, business, job. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, no, that totally, I mean, it all adds up in the end to that exact scenario. As you're starting Amherst Madison and you're starting to get some more people involved, how are you able to convince them to buy in? How are you able to get investors, agents, clients to be like, no, Amherst Madison and Nick's vision is the way to go?
Tough. Yeah. And it takes a long time, and it's one battle and one person and one customer at a time. And that's the thing that they don't put on the brochure of starting a business. And it doesn't matter what kind of business you start, especially if you're bootstrapping it. But I think even if you're not, you have to win one customer and one client and make one raving fan at a time. And it's brain damage and it's tough and it takes years to do. And you build momentum one interaction at a time. In the case of Brokerage, one recruiting appointment at a time. One of the nice things about, so I was selling full time, obviously, and it goes back to the two job things, right? Like when I was a firefighter and I was selling real estate, I had two jobs. Well, I knew that starting a company was going to be a third job, and I couldn't do three jobs. I was already getting stretched doing two, and I was kind of not doing great, honestly, at one point at either one of them because I was stretched so thin. So leave the fire department. Well, my second job becomes starting the company, but I'm still selling real estate because I got to put food on the table and pay my mortgage and pay my rent, So, but the nice thing about that, honestly, I don't sell now. I haven't for a few years. And there's actually parts of it that I miss because when you're selling, you have a recruiting opportunity every day. Because when I was selling, every single time I'd do a deal with an agent, I was trying to recruit them. And every single time I'd call agents to ask about property. So when I was selling, I had all these excuses to have contact with agents on a daily basis. And I recruited a lot of agents for that way, like just doing deals with them.
Did you enjoy the recruiting process of having to, because at that point you're really trying to convince people over and over again that you're the move. Was that... Did you enjoy that? Was it exhausting?
Both, and I guess that's because maybe I'm kind of a masochist. I don't know. I am a masochist. I shouldn't say maybe, but I enjoy doing hard things, and the harder they are, the more I tend to enjoy them. I enjoy the challenge of it, and I know how good it feels to do something successfully that's difficult. And yeah, recruiting agents is brutal. I mean, people that haven't done it before have no idea how difficult it is to recruit agents. It takes years to get even decent at it. I sucked at it for, I would say, probably 6 or 7 years. I should have gotten mentorship. It's like everything else we talk about here at Amherst, right? Like the importance of mentorship and training and coaching. I should have gotten mentorship and training and coaching with recruiting, and I didn't.
Well, you're saying 6 to 7 years, and Amherst is 11 years old,
yeah,
right? So 2/3 out of the time it's been alive, you're saying that you weren't the best at getting agents to come here.
I wasn't, but what I was good at from day one was coaching people and teaching them how to sell real estate. That is something that I was good at. And that's how I grew the company. I realized very quickly that I wasn't going to grow the company going out and recruiting. And the other thing that they don't tell you when you start a brokerage is that almost impossible. I don't want to say anything's impossible, but it's about as close to as impossible as you can get to go recruit successful, established agents as a startup brokerage, because you have no proof of concept. And as much as realtors live in a world of change, they hate change when it comes to their brokerage. They almost all do. They hate it. It's a pain in the ass, and everyone knows it. And about the only way to get experienced agents, or especially like a top producer, if you're a new brokerage, is to give them equity in the company. Mm-hmm. And I had that pressure many times from people that I was trying to recruit. They were basically like, yeah, give me ownership in your company and I'll come over. And those were some hard decisions at times to not do that, because I didn't do that.
Well, and we were talking about going bankrupt earlier as one of the main things. It'd probably help to have some partners in on it and have a little bit of the overhead and just not being completely on you.
It would, but at the same time, this is kind of goes back to business school maybe, or maybe not even business school. It's books I read because I was a business guy and kind of a nerd on, I love Jim Collins' stuff. I read all of his stuff. Trying to think of some other authors I was into then. I mean, over time, of course, I read Phil Knight's books and Howard Schultz's stuff and all the greats. But one of the things that I learned was giving equity away is the most expensive financing you'll ever do. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's easy to do when you're small and and there's no money. People throw it around all the time. They give this person 10%, they give that person 20%, and they don't think much of it. Well, mm-hmm. Fast forward, 5 to 10 years, and you've discovered that you've sometimes given away millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. Whereas you could have just went and got like a line of credit from the bank from a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
So if I was going to do anything, it would be that, and I did, there was times when I got short on money, of course, and I had to max credit cards out, and I had to get a loan on my vehicle, my truck, which I own free and clear, and I had to max out a HELOC. So I've always used debt from time to time, like HELOCs, credit cards, vehicle loans. I've gotten very creative private money loans on real estate, but I've never had a loan specifically on the business. I've used other, because I couldn't get a loan on the business for, I probably could now, but I couldn't forever because the thing didn't make any money for like 6 years. So
6 years.
Yeah. It took 5 or 6 years before we were actually, making, $100,000 or $200,000 net or whatever at the end of the day. For 5 or 6 years, it was $20,000 maybe the business would make, that's not how I was paying the bills. I was paying the bills selling real estate. Uh-huh. And that's where the two jobs comes thing is like, I'd sell real estate, go recruit agents, teach classes, sell real estate, teach classes, recruit. So I did figure out that, hey, I can't recruit these agents. I'm not willing to give up equity to get some agent over here. So I got to go find some brand new agents and teach them how to do this. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. And, Matt Bauscher was the first agent I ever brought over. He was brand new at the time. Mike T was the second agent I ever brought over, brand new. And it's a long list. I mean, the majority of the agents here that sell a lot of real estate, they came here either as new agents or they had only been in the business for a couple of years. And so that's something I identified like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this. I can teach somebody how to do this. I can find somebody that has the drive, the ethics, the character, the work ethic, and teach them how to do this.
Well, it seems like that's one of the main problems you solved within brokerages. I mean, I haven't had the luxury of being at Amherst Madison my entire time, but talking to a lot of agents out there, a lot of brand new agents are kind of thrown to the wolves. Mm-hmm. And yes, you might have a good personality. You might need to be able to talk to people, but you got to have a foundation and be able to talk the real estate talk.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Amherst does exceptionally well.
It does. And I think it comes just straight from my background. And it's because I couldn't sell. Like literally, that sounds dumb, but it's true. Like I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what you say, when you call, what you send, when you meet. So I was starting from ground freaking zero. And the benefit of that is that I learned how to do it the right way, obviously, because I became a successful agent. And then I had a path for other people to follow. Mm-hmm. I could draw a map for somebody and lay it out in front of them. And that's what made us unique and still does to this day is there's other brokerages that have training, no doubt.
Yeah.
But most of them, the training methodology and the system they give you it only works if you already know how to sell or how to build a relationship or how to talk to people. Like you already kind of have to have that from another career or just innately, or else you're screwed. Like their training won't work for you.
Yeah.
So you take somebody like me and plug him into that training system and I would have failed.
Yeah. Yeah. So while you were gaining agents, you were starting to be able to at least convince them enough to get some money flowing within the brokerage. Was there any, or what was a main challenge you had while trying to scale Amherst Madison? Was there a pivotal moment you had to change your strategy during the growing process?
I'm trying to think of a moment of changing strategy. There's so many of them, it's hard to identify. I mean, it's hundreds of little pivots, things that you think are going to work and you roll them out to the marketplace and they don't. Like, for example, early on, the first 12 months, we had a very innovative model for agents and their splits, where it was basically a combination of like a flat fee brokerage and a split brokerage. And they could choose different options. And it was like, it would go up to a certain point and then transition to a flat fee. And there was several different, I don't even remember now because it was a decade ago, but there was a complicated system that we had put in place and trying to find the best of both worlds between like a flat fee and a split. And it failed miserably. And the reason it failed is because it was too complicated. It's too complicated. Like if you can't explain to somebody, I mean, if they say like 30 seconds, I think it's more like 10 seconds. When it comes to something that basic, like your compensation structure or your commission structure with agents, if you can't explain it to them like that, you lost. Like they don't have, you can't make your prospect sit there and think for a second about it. They have to just understand it. I mean, like you look at the way, we work with consumers, it's a percentage.
Yeah.
It's a percentage of the sales price. Like it took 3 seconds to explain it. It has to be damn near that simple or else it doesn't work. Like the second you're sitting across from a prospect, right? And like their eyes kind of glaze over, you've lost them.
Yeah.
Like it's over.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things like that where I had this innovative, super cool, like fancy way of doing something. And then I would roll it out to the marketplace and guess what? It sucked. And they don't like it. And when I say it sucked, I mean, it didn't work.
Yeah.
And that's, I think any business, you find out a lot of those hard lessons is you go into it with this perfect idea and you think, oh, we're going to do everything different. And these bozos, they don't know what they're doing and we're going to do it differently. And we're going to have all this cool shit that we do. And then you find out real quick why things are done the way that they're done.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like there are still ways you can innovate, but not nearly as many as you would like to think. And over time, your business starts looking a lot more like the other businesses out there. Not completely, but in some of those basic foundational ways, like it's just done that way for a reason.
Yeah. Well, I guess, that makes sense why all these bigger brokerages are all kind of similar that way. It's because it works.
It's because it works. And it's because, but even more importantly than that, let's go one level deep on this because this is one of the most important lessons I've learned in my career. It's what the customer wants. And at the end of the day, that is the only freaking thing that matters. That is the only thing that matters. Agents obsess over stuff with their brand and should I use this and should I use that and what should it look like and what services should I provide? And it's so easy to lose sight of you need to be going to your consumer to ask them those questions because that's who you're supposed to be building it for. And in business, it's so easy to lose sight of that. One of the most powerful things you can do is just go to your customer and freaking ask them what they want and then build it. Yeah. And we lose sight of that all the time.
When you come back to entrepreneurs, it always seems so simple. When you really bring it down to kind of like, okay, I'm going to solve this problem. I'm going to solve this for my clients here. So it's exactly what you're saying of going to the actual consumer, asking them what they need and then providing that, which makes it sound super simple when you think about it from the outside. But
yeah. And sometimes they don't know what they want. So there is room for innovation. But when it comes to these basic things like structure, how they pay, how they make money, live versus live stream and all that, you just have to give them what they want. You're not going to change human behavior overnight. And now I say that there's room for innovation. And what I mean by that is that I think Henry Ford was the one who said this. He said, if I would have went and asked all my customers in the beginning what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So there, yeah. And, Steve Jobs is somebody that I looked up to so much, and I followed so much of his path, starting Apple with Woz and everything those guys did. And Steve, just like Elon Musk, just like Henry Ford, it was an innovator.
Yeah.
And he showed that there are some instances where people don't know what they want. And if you give them something new they've never seen before, you can innovate. And that sometimes supply, it's not always a demand side equation. In other words, there is a supply side. I'm saying that kind of poorly. It's not as simple as saying that if you build it, they will come. But at the same time, people don't even know always what they want or what they like. And they do just want to grab what's familiar, and they do just want to grab what's normal. And there's times when you can introduce them to something new they've never seen before, and they'll react to it.
Yeah. Well, the humans in general are very skeptical of anything new. When it first comes, it's always like, no, that's not going to work, until it does. And then it becomes the new norm. But I'll catch myself doing it sometimes, and I swore I'd never be that way. But then I look at something like, that's not how it's done. It just happens as you grow up. You're just like, no, we do it this way, and I've always done it that way. But then someone does come up with something innovative, and it works well, and it's good for the consumer. And then all of a sudden, Apple's taken over.
And that's the key. What you just said is good for the consumer. So although it's an innovative way to solve the problem, they're still doing the same thing. They're still going into the consumer's mind and figuring out a problem and solving it. They're just solving it in a new and an innovative way. So that's the interesting thing, is like they're still kind of doing the same thing. But they're solving maybe a different need than the consumer even knew they had. Maybe they're solving a need that the consumer didn't even know that they had. I mean, you look at, Henry Ford and the automobile, it's like, or airplanes or any of that stuff. I mean, those were needs that we had that we didn't even really know that we had, because we didn't know there was anything that could solve it. And cell phones, and everything that Apple did with cell phones. It's like, did they create the need, or was the need already there? I guess you could have that argument. It kind of becomes a chicken or the egg argument at some point.
Oh, yeah. And and on that journey, it's not like Apple just introduced and everyone loved it.
No.
There's a bunch of challenges and trials and errors and setbacks in order to create that successful company. And to your point earlier, like, they're probably undeniably optimistic, or just like, nope, I'm going to do it because I want to do it and I believe in it.
And that's, Jobs was at that point many times in his career where no one believed in him. I mean, he got fired by his own company at a certain point, and then they brought him back when the company started to tank. But he was at the point many times where, I'm not comparing myself to Steve Jobs, but it's the entrepreneur story. Like I was when I left the fire department, and every single loved one in my life told me I was an idiot and I was making the worst decision. I just had to trust myself, trust my heart, look inside, trust God, and just know that I was going to make it. And he had many of those points. If you read the biographies about him, he had many of those points where nobody thought what he was doing was a good idea, and everyone laughed at him, and he was an idiot. And Elon Musk has been through so many of them. All innovators are. Like, if you look at anybody who's innovated anything, and they're going to hit these points where no one believes in them, and they just have to have faith in themselves. Do
you think that you get to those points multiple times while creating a company?
Yeah, for sure. And they're kind of I call them all in moments. And I always knew starting a company that there was like going to come this moment when I had to go all in, or my business wasn't going to flourish. But what I didn't realize is that there's multiple all in moments. It's like, as soon as you want to level up kind of and go and move your business to a new size, a new scale, a new service, a new level, you hit these moments, and they're varying degrees of them. Some of them are risky, but you're not putting it all on the line. And some of them you're putting everything on the line.
So it sounds like while you're creating it, you're gonna face multiple setbacks, multiple challenges, multiple situations where, like you say, you have to go all in.
Yeah.
So as every entrepreneur experiences that, is there a specific challenge or moment while building Amherst, or the biggest all-in moment you had? Are you able to talk about that experience?
Yeah, there's been a couple of them. Building this building that we're sitting in right now was one of the biggest ones. Our headquarters here on Benjamin in Boise. It was my first commercial real estate development that I did. So I had found this land and came up with the idea for the office, and Matt Bauscher came in with me on the building and on the development. And we started researching it. I got the land, and it's like always something that was going to be a $2.5 million project turns into a $4.2 million project. And at the same time, I was in the middle of remodeling a house that I would eventually move into. And I'd taken a risk on that because it was a big remodel. It was a big flip I was going to do. I was going to flip the house. I was never going to move into it. And circumstances changed in the middle of that process. Find out I have a kid on the way and I'm going to get married, and like my life is changing in a good way, but more pressure and more things happening. Mm-hmm. So my personal life, although there was a lot of good things happening in my personal life at the time, a lot of pressure, a lot of change, going to become a dad. I'm renting, this 500 square foot studio downtown while this house in the foothills is getting shredded and torn apart and rebuilt. This project is good. This building's happening. The building was just an absolute all in for us. I mean, the loan payment on it is, it's like $20,000 a month. And we, that going into it because you know what the damn numbers are and you know what the interest rates are.
Was that a pretty significant increase to where you're at before?
Yeah. Because that's taken my monthly rent at our old office on Emerald. It was like $4,500 a month or something.
So you're taking in $15,000 of overhead.
Yeah.
Once to go into this. So an all in.
Yeah. So I did the math on it. So at the time when we signed the papers, signed the loan, and it was the biggest stack of documents I've ever seen for a loan signing. And I've done a lot of loan signings. I'm a real estate agent, right? So the stack, it was an SBA loan to fund the construction of this building. We had to have it for 3 years. And then after 3 years, we could refi out of it into a conventional loan product. But what they demanded, the SBA demanded, is that we have a $3.8 million lien on every single thing that we owned. Mm-hmm. So not 3.8 total, but a $3.8 million lien on every single piece of real estate that Matt and I owned. And so what that means is that all the equity you might have in property as like a backup, in case something goes wrong, is gone because you can't pull any of it out.
And how many agents did you have at this moment?
So at this moment, when we signed all this stuff, we only had like 75, 80 agents.
Yeah, because I want to kind of put that in perspective of, now we have over 160 agents at Amherst. So you're moving into this new building, paying $20,000, $15,000 more than you were used to at that moment. Yep. And you're taking that gamble. And here, we are a few years later and it's worked out. But
yeah. And so the break even on that, they're looking at the numbers, like in order for us to be able to pay for this building, pay for the mortgage, justify it, we needed 120 agents. Mm-hmm. That was just the math. And so I, talk about pressure to recruit. I knew signing the damn papers that we needed to get 40 more agents and we needed them in basically 18 months.
Well, that's a lot of agents if you only have 75, adding 40 in a short amount of time.
Yeah. And so, and people listening to this might be like, this is just the fascinating thing about real estate is that there are some people that kind of have like an anti-growth mentality when it comes to brokerage. This building is the nicest real estate office in the state. It's one of the nicest real estate offices in the Northwest, and it's a freaking beautiful building. And our agents have been able to use this building to convert $1 million clients and developers and investors and builders. And this building has brought our agents an enormous amount of success and leverage and validation. And the only way we could get it is to add agents. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about the brokerage business is sometimes you run into like this anti-growth mentality.
Why do they have an anti-growth mentality?
I don't know. Because I think agents, it's a scarcity mentality. I think there's agents that feel like, oh, well, if you add agents, then that means that somehow it's going to like diminish me or diminish, like my attention that I get or diminish my impact because, there's agents getting added to the brokerage. It's just a scarcity mentality. It's the same people, Justin, who think there's not enough real estate out there to sell. And like, if there's more agents getting added total, then this is bullshit. There's more agents getting added and now there's less for me to sell. It's a scarcity mentality. It's a failure to see the reality of abundance in this world. And that the top producer in the state, who's Matt, the guy sells a couple $100 million in real estate a year. It's 1% of the market. Mm-hmm. And us as a brokerage who sells, over $1.3 billion in real estate a year is only 5% of the market. Right. So there's just so much opportunity And adding agents to the market in general has zero effect on your business, and adding agents to the brokerage has zero effect on your business, except adding agents to the brokerage means you get better shit.
Yeah.
Like it just does. Like we can't pay for any of this stuff if we only have 40 agents.
Yeah. Well, I can speak to it. I mean, as a young guy who jumped into real estate, I think I was 22 on Mike T's team. When I got to bring my buddy's parents to this office, it just solidifies you a little bit more.
Yeah.
I always talk about as a young agent how there's a solidifying factor, like where you start. As a young agent, you start down pretty low.
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, all right, you get 10% of my trust right away.
Yep.
You know, I have to work for the 90, but as you get to, you know, Mike T level and move up, and then you're at Bausch where it's like he probably gets 60, 70% recognition immediately.
Yep.
And then he's like, I got to prove this 30% that I'm better than this other agent.
Yeah.
But having the brokerage, having the marketing, having all that behind you is a really good factor, especially, I mean, as a young agent or an agent that just wants to not have to work as hard for that part of it.
Yeah.
You know, you take someone to an ugly office, it shows something.
It does. And even somebody like in Matt's position, Matt brings clients into this building every day, just about. I mean, he brings people here all the time, and it's a different level of relationship, and he's trying to make an impact with some people and impress them, quite frankly, on a different level. But it's the same concept. He's still doing it. He's the number one agent, and he still does it, just like the same concept you just talked about, the brand new agent. It still applies to him, and it still applies to me. I mean, if I'm trying to impress somebody, you better believe I'm not freaking meeting them at Starbucks. Yeah, I'm bringing them in this building. Like I do it all the time. I do it when I recruit agents, and so it's just the way that it is. And people, I think, forget that a lot of times. Like, for example, going back a little bit, one of the reasons I started this company and I was passionate about it and had a vision for it is because I wanted to add value to agents through the building, through the facilities, through the brand itself, and obviously through the tools and the training. I mean, I think any agent would recognize that that's a value add. But I didn't see any brokerages doing that when I started Amherst. Like it was almost like they had sort of given up on this idea that like the brokerage brand could add value to an agent's experience. And I knew as an agent that it could. I knew as an agent that there was plenty of consumers who understood there was a difference between brokerage X and brokerage Y. I understood that, especially as a newer agent, hey, that was a critical thing to be able to leverage yourself off of. You know, but then I also started to realize that it wasn't just a new agent thing, because when you start going to try to play in the luxury market, you better believe that they know the difference between brokerages. And it does matter to them what your network is and how are you going to market my house outside of Idaho, and are you networked with other brokerages across the country and across the world, and do you have luxury affiliations? Like you start getting hit with all those questions when you go in those luxury listing appointments. So these agents and brokerages that sit around and say, well, your brokerage doesn't matter, I'm sorry to say that that's just not true. And most of those agents, the reason they say that is because they haven't ever tried to get a new construction deal, a development deal, a luxury deal, or they've never been in a position as a new agent where they were pushing themselves and trying to aggressively grow, and they needed to fall back on that. So, and that's one of the things I think we've proven is that, yes, of course it's about experience and relationship, and of course the agent skill set is way more important than the brokerage brand. Like, I'm not saying that, you know, that's flipped. However, the brokerage can add value to the agent experience in that way. And we've proven that here. Yeah,
definitely. Well, I want to go back to something that you said earlier, was just how much you've changed kind of since starting this company and how you were different in your 20s compared to now. So going off your leadership and your approach to leadership, how has that changed over the years, going all the way back to the Boise State football days?
Well, what I've realized... it took me a long time to realize this, but when I finally did, man, it changed everything. This is going to sound really stupid, but hang with me. It's that not everybody looks at the world the same way that I do. And it's easy to say that to yourself and to feel like you sort of intellectually grasp that, but it's a different beast entirely when you wrestle with it on a daily basis. And that really comes when you start hiring people, you're hiring a team. I was really bad at hiring just for a long time, just like recruiting. And with both recruiting and hiring, it's kind of the same thing, right? Is you're bringing people into this vision, you're baptizing them into the way that you do things, you're selling to them the vision of the company. They have to be a believer in what you're doing, and you have to bring them on. Well, how you do that depends on the person, and you have to do that differently, and you have to be able to adapt your style to fit different types of people and communication styles and their background, and you have to get a lot more interested in them and in how they want to communicate and how they understand and what motivates them. It's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dichotomy, and most things in life are, but that is a dichotomy because you're told you got to push your vision. No one's going to believe in you, but you got to have this vision that you kind of baptized other people in, and you make them believers. And that's all true, but the way you do it has to be tailored to that individual. And I just had zero grasp of that for a long time. And I was just kind of like a bull in a china shop, just running around trying to jam things through and make them happen and force it, my way. And it wasn't until I realized, so the way this person looks at the world, like they fundamentally look at the world differently than I do. And if I sit here and I just yap and talk about the things that are important to me or the way that I look at the world, or I try to sell them based on my worldview, I'm going to fail. I have to figure out what their worldview is and sell them based on their worldview.
Yeah, their needs, their wants.
And communicate with them in that way. I'll just give you an example. Real estate agents as a breed, are entrepreneurs. I wouldn't say they're all entrepreneurs because a lot of them aren't. They don't think that way. They think more like a sales professional than an entrepreneur. But a lot of them are, and the good ones are entrepreneurial minded for sure. I got used to communicating with them, right? Because I didn't have any employees for a long time. And so all my communication was with other agents and salespeople and entrepreneurs, and they all kind of have a rhythm and a style, and you just kind of get used to selling to them and communicating with them and motivating them. Well, then you start hiring W-2 like employees.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? They have very, very, very different worldviews sometimes and needs and wants. For an example, a self-employed person, an entrepreneur, values autonomy and values creativity and values freedom. Like they look at being self-employed as freedom.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them do.
Yeah.
Well, when I realized years into hiring people that a lot of the W-2 people, the people that want a salary, they view waking up every morning and not having a job as the ultimate prison. Like they view it as lack of freedom. They view freedom as, hey, you know what? I'm going to freaking show up at a consistent time, and I'm going to go home at a consistent time, and I'm going to get paid. And then on holidays and weekends and nights and whatever, I'm doing whatever the hell I want.
Mm-hmm.
That's freedom to them.
Yeah.
And more power to them, because you know what? There is a lot of freedom to that. And a lot of this concept of am I self-employed, or do I work for somebody else? It really just comes down to what your view of freedom and control over your life is.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's different, and that was just like a brick in the head when I finally realized that, because I had been communicating with people incorrectly and pushing people away for years because I didn't understand that they just had a different worldview when it came to freedom.
Yeah. So going on the leadership. So continuing on leadership, how were you different so you weren't hiring or doing that when you're in Boise State? You're pretty close to having to.
I got like five more minutes.
Okay. Let me do.
Then I got that coaching call at 10, so I got to go downstairs and get ready for that.
Yeah, you're good. I have these two more that I kind of want to get through. They're more Amherst stuff. So yeah, I don't like that. Okay. So that's kind of stupid. Some of them are. I went through them again. I was like, dude, this is, and you cover half of it while you're talking about it, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I'll lead it into this. I'll just say it. We'll figure it out.
There you go.
All right. When you think about the legacy you want to leave behind, sorry, I don't have that. Okay. So when you think about the legacy you want to leave with Amherst Madison, what comes to mind, and how do you hope your impact will be felt in the real estate industry?
And that's such a great question. Legacy, what people remember. It's a busy world. It's a noisy world. And we don't have an opportunity for people to remember much about us. That's for sure. So if they remembered anything, I would hope that they remembered a group of really genuine professionals, really genuine people who cared about client service and community. That's something that is just baked into me, is client service and community, client service and community, client service and community. I mean, our customer is the agent as a brokerage for sure. Like, there's no doubt about that. I mean, everything we do is for the agent, but it's done to equip agents to better serve the community and better serve customers and clients.
Yeah.
And so ultimately it does come back to those customers and those clients and that community impact. And we've done a lot of great things in those areas. We've got some really, really exciting stuff coming up in the next few months. Some new announcements with our nonprofit that is going to shake things up and give people some new motivation, I think, and really deepen that community impact even more than what we've done historically. And I'm putting that effort in because of what I just said. Yeah, the answer to your question is sincerity and authenticity, right? Because real estate is not always known for that. And real estate agents and brokerages are not known for that. Sadly enough, but they're not. And I think that I've always wanted to flip the script on that. And everything I just said really comes back to, if I stated it simply, Justin, I would say raising the standard in real estate is what we're here to do. And how we do that is being authentic and being just some freaking real people who are there to serve, being sincere and authentic, and then that customer client service and then the community impact. I mean, those are, if you looked at it as a three-legged stool, it's like those are the three legs on that stool that really could come back to raising the standard. Yeah,
and I can definitely speak to that, especially knowing you over the last 4 or 5 years now. I mean, I think a lot of people on the outside looking in see you as very fierce, determined, intense. But what they don't see behind closed doors a lot of time is the genuineness with what you're telling people. People are coming up to you saying, hey, I'm not selling houses. You're like, well, you calling, you emailing, you geofarming, you're doing this. And if they're saying no, then you're like, go do that. Get out of my face. It is a little bit like that, but it's true because you've told us multiple times of how you have to get your foundation going.
Yeah.
But you're saying that as it's coming from such a genuine place. And I noticed that, and I think that everyone in this brokerage, when we're having our our meetings that are very intimate at times.
Yeah.
So I think that does come through when you're in this brokerage, but it doesn't always come through on the outside looking in. And the genuineness and the authenticity of you and this brokerage are unheard of to an extent.
Well, I appreciate that. And I will also say, Justin, that we often talk about the what and the why, and that's what we were just talking about really, is the community and the clients and being authentic. I mean, a lot of that is kind of the what and the why. And then there's obviously a how. It's a how you do that. And on a deeply personal level, part of my how is just telling the truth and being honest. And that doesn't always fly with some people. Like it doesn't always go the right way. It doesn't always land. It doesn't always feel good. But when people come to me, when our agents come to me and they want to know how to step it up or ramp it up or do more business, I'm going to tell them the truth.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always happen in our industry because people are afraid sometimes to have tough conversations. And so there's a lot of owners out there and coaches who they skirt it, they sugarcoat it. They say, well, what about this? What about, and I just have never believed in doing that. I think that agents deserve to know the truth about how to be successful and what's going to move the needle for them.
Yeah. And you are authentic, which is really what it comes down to. If you're authentic, so you're yourself all the time, I think being genuine is proven over time. Did he actually say that and meant it to make me a better person or make me a better realtor or, and that's proven over years and years of being genuine and authentic.
Yeah. And you've seen that in the development of our brand. I mean, our brand is one that certainly did not explode and take off right off the bat. I mean, it's been, in fact, one of the things Jim and I have talked about is a book titled Building a Brand the Hard Way that I'm really interested in writing, because that's been the story of this company and of a lot of companies. It was never something that just flashed and blew up and went ever. Yeah. It's been a slow, long-term build.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, I have one more question for you.
All right, go ahead.
So the whole reason of this podcast is to hopefully help entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and people to, go for it a little bit. Keep trying and get that entrepreneurial spirit up there. And, talking to someone who's successful now, figuring out the trials and errors you go through to get there and how it really looks when you're doing it. So if you could speak to aspiring entrepreneurs who want to make their mark in real estate or any field, what's one piece of wisdom you'd impart on them?
One piece, huh?
Or two.
How about I got a few of them. So the first one is get curious. Curiosity is very underrated. Get curious about something and just dig into it. See what happens. Don't put all this pressure on yourself to find your life's calling in the first 6 months you're in business. Put all this pressure on yourself to be perfect and all this pressure to, recreate Apple or something. It's like, just get curious and start digging into a certain field or product or service or whatever it is that you're doing, and lean into it. And you never know where it's going to lead. Some of the biggest and best inventions in the history of the world were just because somebody was just curious and they just started tinkering around with something. Try to hold it as loosely as you can. If you grip it too hard, you'll crush it. If you don't hold on to it tight enough, it'll fly away. That's a big balancing act with starting any industry, any company, is figuring out how to care and how to hold on to it, but not crush it and grip too hard on it. And that's the same with sports, with business, with relationships, with everything. Then the third thing is you can't give up. You just can't give up. You can pivot, you can rotate, you can flip, you can try this. That didn't work. Let's try that. Well, that didn't work. Let's try that. People are going to leave. People are going to doubt you. You're going to have people in your personal life that are going to leave, that are going to doubt you. I mean, this thing is not just about business. You go start a company and you find out real quick who's in your corner and who's not. Right? But you just can't quit. You just can't quit. As long as you stick to it and you don't give up, man, you just keep hammering and eventually you get through.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I actually heard it from you at a sales seminar, is like, you can think about quitting as much as you want. You just can't quit.
You just can't do it.
Think about it all day. Just don't.
Just don't do it.
And I love that. I think that's an awesome way to kind of go back, because you always will. You always have doubts or something. It's like, you can think about them.
Of course.
Just don't fall into the trap.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Well, sweet. Well, thanks, Nick. That's all I had for you. And I really appreciate, all of your wisdom and everything you had to say.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.